Imagine a city so wealthy that when Rome finally crushed it, they demanded payment in silver worth nearly $300 million today, 200 talents of pure silver every year for 50 years, 375 tons of the metal hauled from the mines of Iberia and North Africa, shipped across the Mediterranean and dumped into Roman coffers. And then, after Rome had extracted every last shekel, they burned it, they razed it, they cursed the ground so thoroughly that for 100 years, the place where 500,000 people once lived became nothing but grazing land for sheep. The city was Carthage. This is the story of how the richest civilization Rome ever fought was systematically erased, not just militarily, but economically, commercially, culturally. The wealth that made an empire, the war that bled it dry, and the fear that drove Rome to commit what can only be called economic genocide. The year is 814 BC. A Phoenician princess named Alyssa, Dido to the Greeks, flees Tyre after her brother murders her husband for his gold. She sails west with a small band of followers, searching for a place to start again. She lands on the Tunisian coast on a peninsula jutting into the Mediterranean. A natural harbor sheltered from the winds, the fertile Majerta River Valley, some of the best agricultural land in North Africa, and a position in the middle of the Mediterranean's busiest shipping lanes. The locals offer her only as much land as an ox hide can cover. So Alyssa cuts the hide into paper-thin strips and encircles an entire hill, the Byrsa, the citadel of what would become the greatest commercial empire the Mediterranean had ever seen. They called it Carthage, the new city. Within a century, the population reached 30,000. Carthaginian pottery from this period has been found across Sardinia, Sicily, and the Balearics. The city was trading before it was even fully built. Then, in 585 BC, Nebuchadnezzar captures Tyre. The mother city falls, and Carthage, the colony, the refugee camp, suddenly becomes the de facto leader of the entire Western Phoenician world. By 540 BC, Carthage is powerful enough to sign a formal treaty with a rising Italian city-state called Rome. The treaty divides the Mediterranean into spheres of influence. Carthage claims North Africa, Sardinia, and parts of Sicily. Rome, still regional, agrees. Think about that. 100 years earlier, Carthage was a refugee camp. Now it's negotiating with Rome as an equal. This was Carthage's true genius, not conquest, though they did their share, trade. Carthage built a proto-global supply chain spanning 3 continents before the word global even existed. By 500 BC, Carthage controlled the Strait of Gibraltar. They were the gatekeepers of the Atlantic. No foreign ship could sail west of Sicily without Carthaginian permission, and if you tried, they would sink you. Around 450 BC, the explorer Himilco sailed north to the Cassiterides, the Tin Islands, Britain. Carthage needed tin for bronze, the metal of weapons and tools. They secured that supply and locked it down. Around 425 BC, Hanno the Navigator took 60 ships down the Atlantic coast of Africa. He established 7 colonies, reached as far as modern Sierra Leone, and returned with gorilla skins, the first recorded encounter between Europeans and great apes. By 400 BC, Carthage controlled the entire North African coast from Morocco to Libya, southern Iberia, western Sicily, Sardinia, Corsica, the Balearics, Malta, an empire of 3 to 4 million people. At the heart of this empire was the Kothon, the double harbor, an engineering marvel with no equal in the ancient world. An outer commercial harbor, 8 hectares of docks and warehouses connected to the sea by a 21-meter channel closed by an iron chain. Beyond it, a circular military harbor with an artificial island at its center, ringed by Ionic colonnades. 220 warship berths, each covered and hidden from view. On the island, a raised admiral's pavilion, so the commander could watch every ship approaching the city. Carthage began minting its own silver coinage around 350 BC. Silver shekels on the Phoenician weight standard became the trade currency of the Western Mediterranean. Even Ptolemaic Egypt adopted it. And then there was Mago, a Carthaginian who compiled 28 volumes on agriculture, crop rotation, irrigation, olive cultivation, viticulture. The Romans called him the father of agriculture. After they destroyed Carthage, the Senate ordered a unique translation of Mago's work into Latin. It was the only Carthaginian book they saved. It shaped Roman farming for centuries. On the eve of the First Punic War, 264 BC, Carthage was the richest city in the Mediterranean. 250,000 people lived within its walls. It controlled more territory than Rome. Its ships sailed from Britain to West Africa to the Levant. Its harbors were packed with goods from 3 continents. And then Rome decided to take it all. The Punic Wars were not just military conflicts. They were a systematic extraction of wealth, a transfer of capital from one civilization to another on a scale the ancient world had never seen. The First Punic War lasted 23 years. When it ended in 241 BC, Rome demanded 3,200 talents of silver, 82,000 kilograms, paid over 10 years, plus the evacuation of Sicily, the breadbasket of the central Mediterranean. And when Carthage was weakened by a mercenary revolt, Rome cynically demanded Sardinia and Corsica too, plus another 1,200 talents. Polybius calls this contrary to all justice. Rome didn't care. But Carthage was not finished. Under the Barcids, Hamilcar, and his son Hannibal, Carthage expanded into Iberia, conquering the richest silver-producing region in the ancient Mediterranean. The Baebelo mine near Castulo produced 300 pounds of silver every single day for Hannibal. The shaft was excavated to a depth of 1.5 miles, staggering engineering for the 3rd century BC. In 218 BC, Hannibal marched an army with war elephants across the Alps and into Italy. For 15 years, he ravaged the Italian countryside, winning victory after victory. But Rome adapted. Scipio Africanus took the war to Africa. At Zama, in 202 BC, he defeated Hannibal. And then Rome imposed terms designed not just to defeat Carthage, but to destroy it. The indemnity after Zama was the largest in ancient history. 10,000 talents of silver, 200 talents every year for 50 years, 340,000 kilograms. Carthage surrendered all warships except 10. All war elephants. All territory outside Africa. It could not wage war without Rome's permission. 100 young men, aged 14 to 30, chosen by Scipio himself, were taken as hostages. Carthage had to provide 3 months of grain for the Roman army and full military pay until the treaty was ratified. Carthage was gutted, stripped of its empire, its fleet, its army, its freedom. And yet, here is where the story becomes remarkable. Carthage did not die. Despite losing Spain, Sardinia, Sicily, and paying 200 talents of silver to Rome every year, Carthage rebounded. A 2019 lead isotope study published in PNAS shows that Carthage intensified mining of Tunisian silver-lead deposits in the Majerta watershed. They dug deeper into their own North African hinterland. They poured investment into agriculture using Mago's techniques, advanced crop rotation, irrigation, olive and grape cultivation. Carthage's remaining African territories became hyper-productive. The circular harbor was expanded. new stone ship sheds were added. Ceramic and agricultural exports revived. The city was booming again, and that terrified Rome. In 153 BC, the elder statesman Cato visited Carthage as part of a Roman embassy. He expected a broken city. Instead, he found bustling markets, full warehouses, ships arriving and departing, a city that had bounced back from oblivion in less than 50 years. Cato returned to Rome and began a campaign of relentless fear-mongering. He ended every single speech he gave in the Senate, on any topic, from tax policy to military appointments, with the same 6 words: Ceterum censeo Carthaginem esse delendam. Moreover, I advise that Carthage must be destroyed. He said it so often that even his political opponents started repeating it. But nobody was laughing when Rome found its excuse. In 149 BC, Rome demanded that Carthage abandon its city and move 16 kilometers inland. The Carthaginians refused. The Third Punic War began. To prove they wanted peace, Carthage surrendered its weapons: 200,000 suits of armor, 2,000 catapults, every warship burned in the harbor at Utica. And then the Carthaginians did something extraordinary. From scrap wood, temple offerings, household metal, they built a new fleet in weeks. They forged new weapons day and night. Women cut off their hair to make bowstrings. For 3 years, against the most powerful military machine in the ancient world, they held out. In spring 146 BC, the Roman general Scipio Aemilianus, adopted grandson of the man who defeated Hannibal, finally breached the walls. The assault lasted 6 days. 6 days of house-to-house fighting in streets running with blood. At the moment of his greatest victory, Scipio wept. Looking at the flames consuming Carthage, he quoted Homer's Iliad. "The day shall come when sacred Troy shall fall." He knew that every empire falls, that Rome itself would one day burn as Carthage burned. 50,000 survivors were sold into slavery. The fires burned for 17 days. The city that had once held 500,000 people was reduced to rubble. You've probably heard that the Romans sowed the fields with salt. That's a 19th century myth, debunked in the 1980s. But the effect was the same. Rome placed a curse on the site. No rebuilding was allowed. The city was left as a monument to Roman power and Roman fear. Today, what remains of Carthage is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a suburb of modern Tunis, overlooking the same turquoise bay that Phoenician ships sailed into 3,000 years ago. Visitors can walk among the ruins of the Punic ports, the Tophet sanctuary, the remains of houses and workshops. But the city itself, the great mercantile empire, is gone. What happened to the wealth? It flowed directly into Roman hands. The Iberian silver mines that once funded Carthage now funded Rome. The geochemical signature of Roman coins changes dramatically after 209 BC, Spanish silver. The same silver Hannibal mined at Baebelo, now stamped with Roman gods and emperors. The only piece of Carthaginian culture Rome preserved was Mago's agricultural manual. Everything else, the poetry, the history, the philosophy, the religious texts, was destroyed or given away to Numidian kings. Cato got his wish. Carthage was destroyed. But the story of Carthage is not a story of defeat. It is a story of what happens when commerce and empire collide, when one civilization becomes so economically threatening that another decides it cannot be allowed to exist. Carthage was the richest city Rome destroyed. But more than that, it was proof that economic power can be as terrifying as military power, that resilience can be more frightening than resistance, and that sometimes the most dangerous thing a nation can do is recover too quickly from its own defeat. Asterisk script: Written for Empires and Economics. Research sources: Polybius, Livy, Appian, Pliny the Elder, Strabo, Plutarch, Columella, PNAS, 2019. Lead isotope study, DOI 10.1073/PNAS.18215555116. Goldschmidt Conference 2017. Wessner et al. Coin Geochemistry. Ridley, Classical Philology, 1986. Salt, Myth, Debunking. Silver Valuation, $82/Oz. May 2026. Conservative Purity Adjustment applied.